Hello, Trekkies and Trekkers. Welcome to the first bonus episode of Trekking Around. Today we are going to talk about the woman of Star Trek TNG, and my guest is Eve Zellick. You should know her for her contribution of the podcast, other podcast of mine that I used to have, but still is online. You still can listen to that, called Orinda Talks. So welcome back everyone, and welcome back Eve. It's been a while.
Yes, it has.
How are you doing?
Doing good, you?
Yeah, I'm good too. A lot of things happening, of course. Busy.
Yeah, same here.
Well, I think we have a lot to talk about in this episode. Of course, this is the first bonus episode of now called Trekking Around. That we used to be Girls Talking Trek. So, welcome to the first new episode, guys, from Trekking Around. Yeah, we're going to talk about the woman of Star Trek TNG. There's of course a lot of them. I think the first question will be a question is any favorite?
Loaxana Troy.
I'm not surprised. I think
There's reasons.
Go ahead.
Well, the thing is, she appeared in both Next Generation and she appeared in Deep Space Nine. And I like her because she's an example of a character who gets misjudged constantly. And she's somebody that on the outside, she has this very colorful, very ebullient personality. She's almost over the top. She's eccentric, but she is unapologetically herself. And underneath it all, like as we go through certain episodes, we find out just how much of a heart she has, because we see that there's that episode where we see the tragedy of the loss of her daughter Kestra and how badly that affected her. And we know that even though her husband Ian Troy was passed away, that she cared and loved him extremely deeply. And other than, like, she had several failed relationships after that, and I think a lot of that was because she really still loved her husband. We see her take on a very nurturing role towards Alexander, who was otherwise neglected by his awful father, Worf, because Worf is a bad dad. But, Alexander really benefited from spending time with Loaxana. And then we see her relationship later with Odo, who is otherwise an outcast, partly because of who he is, and partly because he makes himself an outcast. And there's the episode where they first meet, and he finds her super irritating, but they get stuck in the turbo lift together. And it's, again, an example where we see her heart because Odo has to liquefy, and he's embarrassed about it, and she says, I can swim, and she just holds him in her skirt, and she keeps his secrets about how he feels about Major Kira later on, because being Betazoid, she knows. So we see her keep that secret, but also encourage him to pursue her. And there is the episode, I think it's the Muse, where she has to try and marry Odo to get out of an abusive situation. And that's when we see, like, Odo and Major Kira definitely had a romance, but Loaxana and Odo have, like, the kind of love that goes deeper than romance. Like, they have that kind of friendship bond that it's forever. And we get to see, like, the heartfelt speech he gives and everything. And I always like the line too where she takes off her huge wig in front of him and she's like, we are not always who we show the world. Like, And to me, like, we don't see many betazoids in Star Trek. And for me, she exemplifies what I think a betazoid would be, because I like to think of them being like the Elorians because they're similar. In that they would be warm, they would be compassionate, they would be genuine. They, might be a little silly, but, they have such big hearts, whereas I find Deanna, in contrast, to be very cold, very aristocratic, like Riker says, her betazoid aristocratic attitude. Like, she's not warm, she's not nurturing, she's not loving, and even though she keeps rejecting her mother still loves her. Like, and there was an interview where they were talking about the character, and she said that Gene Roddenberry, who of course was her husband, came to her and said, "I have a part for you and you don't even have to act." So knowing that was Majel Barrett Roddenberry's actual personality as a character is quite interesting, because we don't see many of the women in Star Trek tend to be cold, but she was like the total opposite.
Yeah.
And I mean, quite frankly, who wouldn't want to wear some of those outfits she wears?
Yeah, because that's the, I think, a big difference between her and Troy. They did experiment with the clothing and the hair of Troy, but there was not something that I was saying, okay, that makes her Betazoid and Diana Troy as a warm person or whatever. And every time you see Loxana, she is so colorful and so warm in color that I was, and I exactly had that with the Ferengis in Deep Space Nine. The Ferengis we know in TNG, they're all grayish colored clothes, and if you see Quark in the first episode of Deep Space Nine, bam, colorful, like purple and blue. God else was though.
Yeah, Quark's got a wardrobe that doesn't even go with itself. Like, he's. But although to be fair, so did Jake. Like, Deep Space Nine did not have. They had some weird fashion in there, but, like, to me, Loxana is. I know a lot of fans kind of give her some side eye and put her down and everything, but I really think they missed the point of the character. And I mean, as much as she teased Picard, I think the reason she kept teasing him was because Picard was very stiff. He was very formal. He was very stoic. And I think she liked doing it because she knew it unnerved him, but she was doing it. She wasn't doing it out of malice. She was doing it more to be playful. Mm-hmm. And I mean, she saves the Enterprise in that episode with, I think it's the Antedians, those like weird hibernating fish people. Mm. And then when they wake up and she tells him at the very end, she's like, "That's not the ambassador. They're planning an assassination. They've been planning it this whole time." And she just like drops that.
Yeah. But there was also that was the episode that Riker and Diana were kidnapped by the Ferengi, and and there was that moment that Picard had to convince her that he loved her, and Picard went from diplomatic to this Shakespearean actor. And I always said that is just because the whole time she teased him, now she gets the proper treatment of Picard of, okay, now I'm going theatrical for you, and you don't have to do that anymore. I don't think she said that to him from no, you don't have to do that, Jean-Luc,
she was like, honestly, to me, she was like a breath of fresh air.
Yes.
And like I say, I mean,
although she could be very annoying, but she was very. Yeah. I find her. Yeah, she was one of the nicest characters of that. I'm saying she brought something to the field.
She did, and her relationship with Alexander was amazing. Because I mean, even Deanna couldn't really get through to Alexander because Deanna was so cold and clinical. Even she couldn't get through to Alexander, whereas Lwaxana's sitting with him in mud baths and playing holodeck games with him and being the mother and the parent that he needed, because we know Alexander lost his mother when he was an infant, and Worf is got to be one of the worst parents in Starfleet.
I always had wondering, why do they even do that? You know, especially, and I said that in one of the episodes that still have to be airing next Tuesday. Why wouldn't they show us more about his parents and how they raised Alexander, etc.? Because that is something what we don't know. We only see him a few times, and his parents, we don't see them that much, and it's all. And I think that's for Alexander very difficult, because, yeah, he still has this much of a Klingon DNA, if I can say it like that, and a little bit part of human. And he been raised by human grandparents. So, yeah, I just watched the episode Family. So,
yeah,
that's why
I always got the impression Worf was estranged from his parents, sort of like how Spock was estranged from Sarek and Amanda for a while there. Like, I got that impression. And yet you see, like, in the few times we see them, Worf's adoptive mother even said, I learned how to make you roqueg blood pie, and I learned how to do these things because I wanted to still connect you to your Klingon heritage, you know, and she tried to tell him, like, you don't know how difficult it was, but yet we still loved you.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there any other female characters that you say, okay, that one is very colorful, or that one is jumping out of the whole Star Trek TNG universe?
If we have to go TNG universe, when we go with female characters, give me Lursa and B'Etor. I mean, they were evil. They even appear in Generations. But as bad as they were interesting characters. Like, they were, we didn't see a lot of Klingon women. I mean, we saw K'Ehleyr, but we only saw her for one episode. But, you know, like, one of my favorite lines, and I think it's in Generations, is where one of them they're looking through Geordi's visor, and they're looking at Dr. Crusher, and she goes, human females are so repulsive, and all you see is these crooked teeth and this ugly face. And I mean, the actresses who brought those two to life were, you know, you knew when Lursa and B'Etor showed up that something was going to go down, and it was going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Like, those would be, like, if we're sticking with TNG, those would be my other picks, would be Lursa and B'Etor, as awful as they were, because, I mean, they were awful, but they were good at being awful.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. And there was, I think there's a lot of, a few episodes about them too, as in the Klingon backstory, I believe.
Yeah, to do with the House of Duras and how they were trying to bring down the Empire and the pregnancy and all that. Yeah, like, and, you know, those two, like, I mean, they were probably the first Klingon females, like I say, that we really got to see a lot of.
Yeah.
And they were just, you know, there's just something about them, like, you hate them, but you love to hate them because they're just so good at their role. And, I mean, one problem I always had with TNG is a lot of the main female characters were very flat. They were very two-dimensional.
Yeah. And cold, in a way.
They were, like, like, Deanna Troi was very cold, and the majority of her story was, will she, won't she, with Riker or Worf? Like, that was the majority of her thing. And Dr. Crusher, I take serious problem with, because with Crusher, we know that her husband served with Picard, and he died under Picard's command. So what does she do? Take her grieving son and force him to be on a starship with the man that, as far as he is concerned, killed his father. And meanwhile, there's this whole the will they won't they between Crusher and Picard, which was finalized in Picard. That whole will they won't they was so overdone that there's internet theories that Wesley Crusher was really Picard's. And I didn't as a doctor she was capable, but again she was a very flat character. She didn't have a lot of personality.
Yeah, true.
I mean, I don't like Dr. Pulaski, but at least she had personality.
And she's the only one who can kick Picard's ass.
But Pulaski, she was so bitter. She's like that doctor on the show House, Dr. House.
Yeah,
that's what she reminds me of. But she had more personality.
Yeah.
And again, she's one of those people you didn't like her, but that's because she played the role like you weren't meant to like her.
Mm-hmm. But I had that bit of a feeling with Sheila as well. And I said time after time, because also in the Star Trek Online story arc line, I'm saying, yeah, she is. I hate her, but in the other hand, I can understand her why.
Yeah.
And that's what I had with Pulaski as well. And I must confess, in the first few times I saw her as doctors, I was thinking, no, Dr. Crusher had to come back, But after how more episodes she got, how better I understood her, and saying, yeah, she is in that way a colorful character to. I don't want to say everybody on their toes, but it is more like she's there and you can't get around her.
Yeah, and I mean, one of my favorite moments is when Data puts her in her place, because she didn't like Data because she's a little bit, human supremacist, we'll say. And she kept calling him Data, and finally he says to her, Data, and she's like, what? He's like, it's Data. Well, what's the difference? One is my name, the other is not. And as somebody, my first name is difficult to pronounce and it's weird to spell, so I grew up with a lot of people picking on me for my name. Mm-hmm. So in that moment, I was like, yes, Data, kick her butt, put her in her place.
Yeah.
But, but we're also, the another really good female character. And I mean, in Voyager, she was played by a different actress and stuff. We can't forget the Borg Queen.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't know how Alice Creed did it, but she made the Borg Queen both sinister yet seductive.
Mysterious.
And at the same time, she's a bad guy. But is she a bad guy? Because she's really just what she is. Mm-hmm. She's created, it's implied that she's created to come forth when she's needed. Mm. So she's really just a product of the species. Mm-hmm. And she's not so much evil as she's doing what their species is programmed to do. So Is she really evil, or is she just doing what her species does to survive?
And what I always thought about the Borg Queen is that she has this individual character. Because if you see all the other Borg drones and the other Borg, they don't have that much character as she does.
Yeah. And I mean, even her outfit is designed to look seductive. It's, she's not when we see 7 of 9 the first time, she is not seductive at all. Nope. She just looks like a pile of parts. But the Borg Queen, no matter who plays her, she's always seductive. She's sinister. She's cunning. She's, and she shows, in some ways, she shows a little bit of individuality, which we don't see in the Borg. I mean, her plan to capture Picard and make him Locutus, but still retain a small part of him to bridge the gap between humans and Borg, you know, that's kind of an interesting take for Borg, because Borg usually come through like a steamroller and just plow everybody over.
Yeah.
But I mean, she was an excellent villain.
Yeah. I think that is also, we don't see that much female villains in Star Trek. And
yeah, it's been more recent that we get female villains.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another female character in TNG that I like to talk about is Guinan. What do you think about Guinan?
I like Guinan. I take issues with the actress due to things she's said in recent years that were highly inappropriate. But
me too.
I do like the character of Guinan. I like the fact that Whoopi Goldberg was literally like, I'm just a fan. I don't care if you pay me. Just give me a part. And I like the fact that, in a way, she had a similar heart to Lwaxana, like, but unlike Lwaxana, who was like, I'm here, I'm fabulous, look at me, Guinan was more like mysterious.
Yeah.
And I mean, she's the only person that terrified Q. And we don't even know why Q is terrified of her. All he says is she's dangerous.
Yeah.
And I mean, one of my favorite episodes with Guinan is the one Relics, where Scotty appears.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And he's in the bar and everything. And Guinan ends up Data gives him a bottle that Guinan's been hiding of real I think it's Aldebaran whiskey.
Yeah.
But I mean, Guinan is Guinan in a way was almost a better ship's counselor than Troy was.
I always have said that, yeah.
And I mean, that fits with the idea of, you know, even now, people will go to their favorite bar and they'll pour out their guts to the bartender.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a Deadpool fan, and there was this one video that somebody made as a fan, and Deadpool goes into a bar and he's like, bartender me, you know, ask me about my day and listen to my problems while you polish the counter. And I'm thinking, but that, you know, Guinan in a way is like that. Everybody comes to her with their problems.
Yes. And that's why probably a lot of fans have the same feeling of the Guinan is a better ship's counselor than Troy herself. And I mean, Guinan had some really good episodes. There's that episode where they're in the past and they meet Mark Twain, and there's Yesterday's Enterprise, where she's the only one who knows something is wrong because her species can sense changes. Yeah. And she tells Tasha, like, I don't know, but I know you're not supposed to be here. Yeah. Yeah. Talking about Tasha, I think, of course, Denise was very young when she was playing in TNG. But what do you think about her character in the way of her being this young female security officer, and also, I think she would be one of the youngest of the, I don't want to say in the TNG world, but I mean like as a senior officer. I liked her because she managed to be a capable and competent security guard without being cold and hard. I mean, we know her backstory. She comes from a planet that's completely overrun with insane amounts of crime. She mentions gangs that go around doing SA on women and having to escape and stuff. And I mean, she was a very capable and competent security guard. And I mean, obviously, even though they were under the influence of that alien entity or whatever, that I can't remember what it was, that one episode where everybody was like drunk, and she kind of hooks up with Data. At the end of the day, like, people make fun of that, but it makes complete sense why she would, because to her, Data would be safe. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He would be safe. He would be respectful. And we know at her funeral, Data struggled with trying to understand. And then later in Measure of a Man, the one personal effect they bring into the courtroom is the hologram of Tasha Yar.
Yeah.
And it's something that he kept, that he cherished.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, for the brief time she was on the show, she made a big impact. And it's kind of nice to see a female security guard, because when the show debuted in the 80s, you didn't think of security guards as being female.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You tend to think of them as being male. Yeah. Even now, you think security guard, you'll often picture a man. And I mean, later, like, obviously we know there's been other female security guards earlier in the timeline, because in Strange New Worlds we have La'an. And I honestly think that in the Orville, I always forget her name, but the security guard, I honestly swear.
I know who you mean.
I swear she was based on Tasha, because the character is very, very similar.
Mm-hmm.
I actually like Tasha, because, like I say, she was capable and she was competent, but she wasn't like she was still feminine. She still gave off some femininity. She didn't come across as, like, I don't know.
Yeah, too muscular. Too
Yeah.
muscular, yeah. Yeah. And I think because she is so young, she also have still a lot of to learn. And I noticed that she still is this, I don't want to say pushover, but she is still, okay, I stand my ground. That is what I learned from when I was with the gangs on my planet. And you could see sometimes her frustration in things that, I think typically because she is that young. But I do think she was one of the warmest senior crew members.
And she was unflappable. Like, when danger struck, she would just act.
Yes.
She didn't get scared. She didn't react in heat. She just reacted as the situation called for.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Worf, as security, we know, was very, I need to cling on my way out of this. Whereas she was just like, nope, it's got to be done. And she just did it. Like, she was always calm, which I think for a security guard, even somebody as young as her, is important, because, I mean, even now we see issues with police who sometimes, acting in the heat of the moment, don't always act in the best way they should. So the fact that she stays calm, she always stays collected,
Yeah.
Even Q doesn't ruffle her.
He puts her on a punishing band in the first episode. But okay, do you think that there are female characters that are being an example for the female characters in other series from Star Trek?
I would say yes. It's kind of hard to pin. Like, to me, I see, like, I know Strange New Worlds is set earlier in the timeline, but in our world it comes later. And to me, La'an Noonien Singh is very much Tasha Yar.
Yes.
Especially because we know her story. Like, she's connected to Khan, who becomes the villain who defeats Kirk twice. We've got, we don't really see ship's counselors ever again.
No. It's not really.
But I will say there's some similarities between Guinan and Kes. Because there's a lot of times where Kes ends up imparting some lesson or some advice, despite her youth, to somebody on the Voyager crew before she goes nuts.
Yeah.
So I see some similarities there, and I see some similarities as well between Kes and Ezri Dax.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas I see Tasha Yar, and to me she comes across a little bit more like almost like Jadzia Dax was a bit based on her, because Jadzia has that similar, like, calm, very collected, cool personality, like more so than Major Kira, who's full of fire.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So there, so there's that. And I mean, there's nobody really on Lower Decks that would fit that mold, because Beckett Mariner's just a loose cannon, but
Yep.
and I mean, in Discovery, like, there's not really anyone who stands out in Discovery except maybe Detmer, being another young bridge officer.
Yeah.
A young bridge officer. She survived some tragedy, but she's very calm. She's very collected. She keeps her head about her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Versus, say, Tilly, who I love Tilly, but at the beginning she's very silly and very young.
Yeah. Yeah. She is.
And I have to wonder if some of the character traits of Pelia in Strange New Worlds came from a little bit of Loaxana.
Yes!
Pelia's got that
I was
energy.
thinking about that!
Like, she's just got that energy.
Yes! But also that the attitude and allure of her. I don't know if that is because of the species she is, but yeah.
And
I know what you mean.
She's got a little bit of Vash in her too, with the stolen artifacts. And
Yeah,
things like
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like,
Yeah.
So I mean, there's some definite similarities there. Like, that's one thing I got to say with the newer Star Treks is we're getting more colorful and vibrant women than we had previously.
Yeah. And also that the engineer from Discovery, what is her name? This comedian. What is her name? I forgot her name now.
The engineer in Discovery is Stamets.
No, I don't mean Stammet. I mean, is it Tick? No, it's not Tick.
Oh, Tig Notaro, Jet Reno.
Yeah, her.
Yeah, I like her.
I like her.
Yeah, she reminds me a lot of Scotty.
Yes.
Same as Pelia. Like,
yes.
She does what it takes to get the job done.
Yes. As that funny moment of when I thought it was Scott with a few other senior crew members are stealing the Enterprise. Or was it the Enterprise or Discovery? I thought the Enterprise. But she just walked on the bridge with, you can't do that because this and this and this is there, and you want to steal us? Go ahead, you have to do this and this and that, And I was thinking, oh dear, that's exactly something typical for her.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, no, she's one of the more fun ones too.
Yes, yes. She is.
I like that we're starting to see more of that. Like in TNG, a lot of the female characters were still relegated to what we would consider stereotypical female roles.
Yes.
Doctors, counselors, nurturers, nurses. Tasha Yar being a security guard was the one standout. So we see a lot of that, but I like that in later shows we're getting more female characters in different capacities.
Yeah.
And we get some good female villains. Like, I love that the big villain in Next Generation happens to be the Borg Queen.
Yeah.
More than any other.
Yeah.
And then later in Deep Space Nine, the leader of the Founders that we always see is female. Yeah. Or at least she portrays herself as female.
Yeah.
I will say, another character I have to think that would be based on a Next Generation character would be Moogie from Deep Space Nine.
Yes.
Can you imagine if her and Loxana ever
Oh
met?
my
Like, the two of them? They'd
Oh
be
my
like best
God.
friends. Because they're so over the top and they're so feminist. Like, they're both
Yes.
very feminist characters.
Yeah, yeah. But also,
And I
like,
mean,
they stand their ground, you know?
yeah. Yeah.
Mookie is the only one who can kick Quark's ass. And I always have to laugh about that.
Yep. Like, and I mean, she's in a similar position to Loxana in that Quark rejects her, but she really does love him, and she really does wants what's best for him.
Mm.
And he doesn't get it. But yeah, I've always thought, like, it was too bad that those two never met, because I could see them becoming like best friends.
Yeah. I'm playing Dom Jot or Dabo.
Exactly, and with both of them being very feminist, you know, I could see that being a big thing, because I could see her encouraging Moogie with her strides to bring equality to the Ferengi, and at the same time, I could see her being, you know, having no issue with the naked Ferengi females, considering Betazoids get married.
Yeah. That's gonna be a fun thing if you got those two talking.
Yeah, because I mean, we know Betazoids don't like Ferengi because Ferengi are one of the species they can't really read, and they find Ferengi to be kind of distasteful in the way they are, but I could see those two having fun together.
Yeah. And especially
embarrassing their children.
Yes. Yeah. What else is to say about the woman?
Trying to think, because I mean, a lot of the female characters after that tended to be like one-ofs, like they just show up for one episode and then they're gone.
Yeah.
Because it was still a very male-dominated cast at the time.
Yes. Talking
Which
about
is, I think,
that, we have that episode. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, I think it's because when they brought the Next Generation, I mean, it had been like 20 years since the original, basically. And I think they wanted to bring in some changes, but they didn't want to change it too much.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we've seen it now with the new Star Treks. How many people sit there and grump and go, well, I only like Kirk. Or I only like the classic 5 shows. I don't like the new stuff. Like, don't give me new stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, so I think they didn't want to make too many changes at the time.
But the female One Day Fly, if I can say it like that, they brought something on the level that the original cast, I mean, from DJ, the senior officers, couldn't. And I don't know if they did that on purpose, the writers, but if you take, for example, Tasha's younger sister, or Wesley's girlfriend, they bring something more active role for a female than the senior, and that's what I really because every time when there was a Troy episode, I was thinking, okay, Troy has something to do, you know. Normally she doesn't have anything to do or whatever, and we only see her ability a bit more in the series and movies after that, when she, for example, had I'm saying it so. When she got Barkley as a patient. So.
Yeah. Oh, I know who we forgot that was important. Ensign Cito.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, she's the one that she was part of the disgraced Nova Squadron
Yeah.
with Wesley. And then there's the episode Lower Decks where the four are all competing for that promotion. And she ends up taking on the most dangerous mission for a young ensign to help a Cardassian spy get back across into Cardassian space. And she knows the probability she can return is not very high.
Yeah.
And I mean, the fact that Picard tells her flat out, like, I requested you because I wanted to make sure you got a fair second chance. And the kind of bravery she displayed, because, I mean, she didn't have to take the mission. He said that she didn't have to. But she stepped up and she took the mission. And we found out in that episode, too, she was one of Worf's best martial arts students.
Yeah.
And she gave her life so that this spy could get back. And he provided so much valuable information to the Federation.
Yeah.
So we have her. And then the other one, and I don't know why people hate her, Keiko.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what is with the hate for her, because if you look at Next Generation and you look at Deep Space Nine, her and Miles O'Brien actually have what is a fairly realistic portrayal of a marriage.
Yes.
They have their bad times, like when they lose Molly initially. They have their good times. They struggle with each other.
Yeah.
Sometimes they fight, you know. She sacrifices her career temporarily for him. Like, to me, I have to wonder if the reason people hate her is because it's a realistic marriage and not a TV marriage.
Maybe. It's too real.
Nobody hates him. They all hate her, and I don't get it.
Yeah. And she was, I think, in that way, she is with one of the cast that is regular, that is bringing the warmth for as a mother and a wife, and so I don't know why people hating her.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because, I mean, we know the Enterprise is a ship with families on it because it takes into account the fact that in Starfleet you're going to have families, especially on these long missions. And yeah, to me, her and Miles, I mean, we see more of it in Deep Space Nine, obviously, but her and Miles, like, they have a very functional marriage. And I mean, it's also, at the time it would have been a little bit unusual, but nowadays blended marriages are very, very common, where people come from two distinct cultures. And I mean, the Irish culture is a very old, very strong culture, and Japanese culture is ancient. And so you've got that side of it too, like the blending of cultures. Like, they named their first one Molly, which is a very Irish name, and then their son later is Kiriyoshi, which is a very Japanese name. And I mean, you yourself, you're in a blended marriage. You're Dutch. Your husband is British. Like, but
I'm mixed as well. To be honest. I'm half Dutch, half common. Indonesian. Yeah, it's more common.
But at the time, like, it wasn't common, you know. But what I did like is, and I thought about this the other day, there is kind of that stereotype of Caucasian men and Asian women. You don't usually see it the other way around, to be fair. You don't see many Asian. I have had clients where the mom was Caucasian and the dad was Asian, but it's very uncommon still. But I like that they didn't fall into any stereotypes with those two over it. Because they could have easily, especially for the 80s, they could have easily gone the stereotype route, but they didn't. So, the idea that they had that in a time when blended marriages were less common, and nowadays blended marriages are so common we don't even think about them, really.
And I think that is also, again, I don't want to say a message, but it's more like a learning point maybe from our Star Trek. that
Yeah.
it is common. It is not something that and it can work, And we see that also with, for example, with Kiko's and Miles O'Brien's wedding. It is a part European and part Japanese.
Yeah, because her outfit is very Japanese.
Yeah.
Right down to not wearing white, because most Asian cultures, you do not wear white when you get married, because white is a funeral color.
Yeah.
And the fact that she's wearing like a cherry blossom pink, well, you can't get more. And then it's a very, like, the hat was different, but the kimono style outfit she's wearing, I like that she was still able to honor her tradition and her background.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see that even though in the future those things don't divide us, that we don't have to give it up for it not to divide us. Because even the way Miles O'Brien speaks, he speaks in a very Irish manner.
Yeah. I think that's why we love him.
Kardashians.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we have talked most of the TNG woman in a way of that is said in the most of the episodes.
I will say they did Dr. Crusher wrong in one episode. We could have really done without the episode Sub Rosa. We really could. We could have done without the candle ghost. I'm sorry, but we could. And the only reason I'm thinking about it was I saw a meme on one of the Star Trek pages, and it's from A Christmas Carol, which Sir Patrick Stewart did star in it, and it says, "Tonight you will be visited by 3 ghosts," and you see Beverly, and she's like, "Some people have all the luck."
Yes.
I'm like, we did not need that episode. That episode is just, like, when I rewatch Next Generation, I skip that episode because I'm like, I can't seriously take. And the thing is, Ronald D. Moore, like, he normally doesn't do stuff like that because I'm a huge Outlander fan, and he's like one of the big producers on Outlander.
Yeah.
And like, I sit there and I go, how on earth did they come up with Candle Ghost? And it's funny because when I was doing, like, the first time I saw that episode, I was a teenager, and I'm like, what is this nonsense? And then it came out in the news several years ago. There was a lady she was in the UK. I think she was British, and she, like, married a 300-year-old pirate ghost, and then later divorced the pirate ghost. And I'm like, how does that even work? I'm like, did you watch too much Star Trek or something? You needed to, like, that was my first thought was, oh, she found a ghost like Beverly Crusher.
Yeah.
Like, we did not need that episode. It did not do her character justice, and it was just kind of a head scratcher.
No, it was a really weird episode.
Like, yeah, it was one of those ones where it's like, could we just throw that away? Like, the one that they did Deanna Troi really well that I thought was fairly progressive, and this is going to be controversial, is the one where she gets impregnated by the alien. And the first thing they talk about is whether or not she's keeping the child. And the way they deal with it was very matter of fact.
Yeah.
Because depending which country you're in depends on what the laws are surrounding keeping a pregnancy or not. Like in Canada, it's legal to end a pregnancy, but I know in the I know south of the border in the US, it's becoming a thing where some states are starting to outlaw it again. And so it's interesting that before it was even protected under law in many countries, that it was discussed in that episode, and then they discuss it. They discuss it as, okay, is this something you want? You know,
but that is
what
also,
are you going to do?
That's also with the fact with in that symbiont episode that Beverly Crusher will, the symbiont became in the body of a female. And That's, of course, the first, I don't want to say first signs of gay episodes, but I think that was still a very loud sound for a lot of people to say there are lesbians, there are gay people, etc. So
I always took the symbiotes like. I know people talk about Trill and say Trill are representative of transgender, but to me, I always saw it as the symbiote doesn't take over the host. Like Jadzia is very much female, and she never expresses characteristics otherwise.
Yeah.
And that Trill, who played by John Glover in Next Generation, who steals the symbiote, he doesn't change the fact that he very much expresses as male. So I have to wonder, and I've kind of speculated because we don't know. I have to wonder if the symbiotes maybe are maybe don't have gender, like maybe they're asexual reproduction, because a lot of aquatic creatures can do that.
Yes.
They can and we know they live in water pools. So you have to kind of wonder if maybe that, the symbiote doesn't really have a gender, but rather just blends with the gender of whoever it enters. Because even Esri never expresses anything other than being female.
Yeah. But that's also
they draw on the memories.
Yes.
But it doesn't change who they are.
Yeah.
Whereas that episode, I can't even remember what it's called. It's that one where they go to that planet where the people are all like non-gendered, I think is the word. I forget what it's called, but they meet that species and one of them, and I think they kind of did it wrong because Riker did not need to sleep with the character. I mean, he seriously knock it off, Riker. But that one character, and the character starts out as like a neutral gender and then starts expressing female characteristics, and then they force her back into neutrality. And I can't remember the name of the episode, but I mean, that to me was one where it was kind of like they had the right idea there, and then they just kind of ruined it because of course, Riker had to be space pimp, and that just kind of ruins the whole point of the show.
Yeah.
Because to me, that kind of implied that, and I've heard this from some of my LGBT friends, where especially my female LGBT friends, where they run into guys who are like, "Oh, well, you just need the right guy to turn you," and that's how that episode came across to me. And so to me, it's like they had the right idea, but they went the wrong way. But I just can't remember the name of it.
No, but did they?
My episode names.
Didn't they have some similar episode with a Trip from Enterprise with the gender neutral kid, and then Trip is going to teach her riding and writing.
Yeah, they did, and I can't. Yeah, because her and I'm hoping I'm using her correctly here. I could be using the wrong pronoun. I can't remember the episode that well, but her entire life was she was basically supposed to be an incubator.
Yes.
And and Trip stepped up, and he was.
Of course, Trip.
You know what though? I mean, Trip wasn't. In a way, it was almost like they tried to make Trip a bit of a Riker, but it just didn't work for that era.
No, and I always say, and I always have to laugh at when, so anyone talks about Trip, but he's a womanizer. I said, well, there's only one woman who could tame him.
Yeah,
and that is T'Pol. Yeah, that's the Vulcan.
Although I really do like the episode where Trip gets pregnant.
Yes.
That one still makes me laugh.
I love that episode. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that one's hilarious. But yeah, like Trip was nowhere near the womanizer that
Riker was. Yeah. And Kirk.
We didn't really have a womanizer in Enterprise.
No.
They kind of dropped that.
No, I'm glad to. And although I do think Malcolm and Trip were one that, I don't want to say close, but they give them that attitude about them. Although Trip got to pull in at the end, and well, Malcolm is still Malcolm, and but now I didn't know what to say. What did I want to say about it? I can't remember now. I lost it.
That's okay. But it's funny. You remember that episode with that one person, because I forgot that episode was even there. But because I mean, we know in Star Trek that there are species with genders other than male and female. Like the Binars don't have gender for the most part; they're just paired. You've got Andorians have 4. And that ends up becoming an issue for their population because they have to have a quad or they can't have a family. Because, I mean, we see Commander Shran has his love interest, but it's just the 2 of them.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, we know there's that side of it, but yeah, there's certain episodes where, they just kind of completely dropped the ball on whatever it was they were trying to do there.
Yeah, and you remember that episode when they went to this planet and all the females were the matriarch and they were
Angel One.
Yeah,
and Riker yet again had to go and have his fun.
Yeah,
and he wore that ridiculous outfit.
And that was so funny that Tasha Yar and Diana were teasing him with it.
Yeah, no, they were. I mean, but to be fair, I will give Riker the fact that while he was a womanizer, he never actually shamed the women.
Yeah.
He did respect the women, and he saw it as, he's going out and having his fun. They're having fun. It was all consensual. Like, there was never anything.
But he always come back to Diana Troy.
Yeah, he did. And I mean, that was kind of apparent from the first episode that they were going to be a back and forth until the very end.
Yeah.
The Picard Crusher thing didn't make sense. To me, it's like, if your husband died under his command, why would you have romantic interest in him?
Feelings can grow, but like you said, why would you take your child to the same starship as the captain that his father died? And what would it do to you? And I can remember that they had some kind of a conversation about it, and Crusher said, well, I will do my part as a doctor, and further we don't have to like each other or whatever. I can remember.
Yeah, that was in the first episode in Farpoint, I believe, because Riker's talking to Wesley, and Wesley says, Picard brought my father's body home. And he's and the other thing about Crusher is she's a bad mom too, because she allows the crew to bully Wesley.
Yeah,
she allows all the shut up Wesley, and she allows them to put him down and treat him poorly.
I always thought also that she works more and she gives more to her work than as a mother as Wesley.
Yeah, I almost have to wonder if she was a reluctant mother, like more like he just happened and so she just dealt with it, because you never got a sense of her feeling maternal towards him or anything like that. Like you really didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, she didn't even really care when when he went with the Traveler, she didn't even care.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what kind of mother would not stand up for her son when the crew was bullying him, especially when there was times he saved that ship?
Yeah.
It really didn't make sense. Like I know we tend to talk about bad fathers, but she was a bad mother. Which is kind of sad because, I mean, later on, we see Major Kira embrace Zial, even though she doesn't like the fact that Zial was the result of Gul Dukat and her mother, but she eventually embraces her. And it's funny that somebody who spent an entire life waging guerrilla warfare and is essentially branded a terrorist, who has a deep-seated hatred for everything Cardassian, would eventually embrace, Gul Dukat's affair baby with her mother.
Yeah.
And yet Beverly Crusher's son is the only thing she has left from her marriage, and she seems to just not give a darn.
Yeah.
Like we seem to get like really good parents in Star Trek or really awful parents, and there's not really much in between.
I know. Yeah.
Like I mean, she reminds me a little bit of Samantha Wildman in Voyager, because Samantha Wildman did not intend to give birth in the Delta Quadrant. It was an accident because they didn't mean to get there. But we only see her briefly after that, and she never seems to be, like, her kid never seems to be with her.
Yeah.
Her kid seems to be always running around the ship, and Neelix is the one taking care of her.
Yes, yeah.
Like,
True.
Where's the mom?
Yeah.
I mean, 7 of 9 did a better job raising the Borg children than...
Oh well. It's always... If you would rate the woman in TNG in general, from 1 the bad and 10 the greatest, what kind of a rating would you give?
I would give it about a 6, because the main cast women were very two-dimensional. They were not very well thought out. They had more episodes, like when they did get episodes, they were more centered on them and something to do with a man. There wasn't a lot there, but we had our guest characters and our recurring characters, and those women were played brilliantly.
Yeah.
But either way, it was definitely still more progressive than the original Star Trek. Because, I mean, we have poor Lieutenant Uhura, who most of the time she's just repeating what the computer says. And we have Nurse Chapel, who doesn't actually have much of a role in that show. But I would say, I would give it a 6, because the main cast women were not very well done for the most part. I'm not going to include Tasha Yar because she was only there for a few episodes, and then she left the show. And then her later character Sella was way better written. But the recurring ones, like the Klingon, the Duras sisters, the Borg Queen, those ones, Luoxan, like those were really good characters. Those were characters where you wanted to watch because you just knew something good was going to happen.
Yeah. All right. That is a good rating and explanation. So, thank you for this lovely conversation again. And
anytime.
We had a lot of talk about this subject. So, I think we did a good job.
And this is a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is always a lot of fun. It is, because I think we female just have another perspective as men about subjects of Star Trek. That's why I had Girls Talking Trek, but yeah, it has changed now, and I always have said it. I always have said it. It was something that I and Amanda did, so it has to. It's gonna change.
Yeah.
Sooner or later. So, but thank you, and till next time.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for listening, and I will be back soon with another bonus episode for you guys. If you have any Trek subjects you'd like to talk about, let me know, and I will see when I will make this episode. You can send an email with your name, subject, where I can reach you, and if you'd like to be my guest, to Trekkie1982 sto@hotmail.com. I will contact you as soon as possible. You can also use this email address if you have any questions, suggestions, ideas, or something else you'd like to discuss. I would appreciate it if you liked this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends and family. Trekking Around is to listen on Spotify, Amazon Music, on the Facebook group and the YouTube channel.